Let's talk about the differences between a ketogenic diet and a carnivore diet. And yes, there are a number of different ways to do a ketogenic diet, and there are a few different ways to do a carnivore diet. But I want to talk about the main differences between them in kind of broad brush strokes here. We're not going to differentiate between the lion diet and relaxed carnivore, just like we're not going to talk about the differences between clean keto, Mediterranean keto, and dirty keto. These are just the broad brush differences between a ketogenic diet and a carnivore diet. Yes, and I want to address, of course, the first objection anybody will have to this, and that is carnivore diets are ketogenic diets. Strictly speaking, that's true. A person on the carnivore diet is likely to be in a state of nutritional and metabolic ketosis, meaning there'll be free ketones in their blood to some degree, due mostly to it being difficult to get enough carbohydrates to knock you out of that state of ketosis. You get in ketosis by not having or consuming a very large amount of carbohydrates, which then necessitates your body to respond with the production of ketones to help you use fat for energy. And that's fine. It's difficult to get enough carbs on a carnivore diet to kick you out of ketosis unless you're drinking large amounts of milk, because milk contains naturally occurring sugars. So if you're on the carnivore diet and you're drinking a large amount of milk, and you may be doing that for bodybuilding reasons, for instance, to help pack on muscle mass, unless you're doing that, you're probably in a state of ketosis. But there is more to what makes a diet a ketogenic diet or not than the mere presence of ketones. There's a methodological difference too. Think of it as a mindset. First difference is that you're not chasing ketones on a carnivore diet. On keto, you chase ketones, even if you only do it subconsciously. Every time you eat, you may be worrying about ketones in your ketogenic level, even if you're not really thinking about it. This is why you see a lot of people having scales in their kitchen to figure out how much asparagus they're eating or whatnot, and that the net carbs in their keto treat are going to be too much. Pretty much anybody doing this, even veteran keto people, tend to do this. I know because I was one. I did keto for a long time before moving on to the carnivore diet because I just didn't want to deal with the headache of chasing ketones anymore. That was kind of, when you boil down most of my reasons, why I did that. There's a second difference. You chase ketones because you're still eating plants. If you're eating plants of any kind on a regular basis, you're not really doing the carnivore diet. I know there are people who tell you, well, berries once, all the time are keto. Those aren't carnivore. I'm not going to say it's bad that you're eating them. That's your call to make, right? You're the only one who can tell you what you should or shouldn't eat at the end of the day. But it's not carnivore. Things should be called what they are. And a carnivore diet is eating meat. People can argue about dairy, eggs, and all the rest, but it's animal products. That's what a carnivore diet is. Maybe you're doing ketovore if you're eating them, where you're doing a very heavy animal base, but still have some greens, basically. That's what kind of makes ketovore. Maybe a few nuts here and there. But you're not eating nuts and you're not eating greens on a carnivore diet. Or maybe you're doing, an animal-based keto where you're still eating plants every day, but it's still very heavy in the animal products and less the typical plant material. But those aren't carnivore. And we're not going to count spices in this because that's just a whole other can of worms to open up. But on keto, you still view plant foods as healthy alternatives, as a healthy food option. Whereas on carnivore, you don't. On keto, you see fiber and you see that it comes from plants and still think it's a necessary thing, and that it's good for you to consume a fairly large amount of it to, remain being regular. But when you go carnivore, you tend to figure out that that's not actually true and you don't need those things anymore. The third difference still involves plants. Not only do you not eat plants on a carnivore diet, you tend to look at them with hostility. Plants don't want you to eat them, and they have naturally occurring defense mechanisms to try to get you to not eat them. Things like oxalates and other inflammatory, natural occurring substances in their bodies. We know from various countless testimonies we see online in various social media groups and in countless interviews on various carnivore channels that pretty much as soon as you stop eating plants, people have maladies that just simply go away. Whether it's eczema, dandruff, I've seen that one, joint pain, or very serious things, they just go away. And these aren't often things that you would think of as being, metabolically influenced. Not most people wouldn't think of MS as being metabolically influenced, but Dr. Sean Baker on his podcast channel had a long form interview with somebody who was treating that condition with a carnivore diet and doing it with great success. We've also seen things like eczema and other issues treated for this. And it goes back to plants. Plants don't want you to eat them. On a ketogenic diet, you tend to think that plants are fine, and you almost go out of your way to include them. When I did carnivore or keto, it got to the point that I was having to sort of force myself to eat them just to remember to eat them. Otherwise, I'd rather have the cheese and the meat. This is one of the reasons I went carnivore. It was like I was naturally wired to go carnivore. The awareness that plants aren't your dietary friend is a huge difference between keto and carnivore. Plant-based keto exists, but there's no such thing as plant-based carnivore. That's a contradiction in terms. While there is plant-based keto, but if you're doing plant-based keto and you're seeing this, please, I beg you, go look to see how they make those protein powders that you tend to consume, those pea proteins and other things. Once you learn how they actually do that, you may want to change your diet. Fourth difference, keto diets are primarily weight loss and weight management diets, and the carnivore diet is not. That's not how it's framed. That's not how it's presented to people. Though I will put an asterisk by this one and point out the obvious. If you spend any time on carnivore social media groups, you're seeing a growing number of people who are, one, having a great deal of success with weight management and fat loss with carnivore, including me. And two, that's their main thing that they're doing it for, not for these other issues. And people who do that should be respected, and including some of their rather unorthodox carnivore decisions they're making to achieve that goal. And I'll get into why in the next difference when I go over that, really. But keto is sold to people as a fat loss or weight loss diet, first and foremost. And while it can be used for metabolic repair and the rest of it, keto is first and foremost for weight loss. While carnivore is mostly about metabolic repair, stopping or preventing those health issues I just went over that many people have been dealing with, but haven't gotten resolved using traditional means. And then finally, it is a weight loss protocol as well, based on the idea that once your metabolism is repaired, the things that keep you from overeating will be resolved too, and then you'll start losing weight. Again, carnivore and weight loss is actually a really complicated topic. I'll talk about my experience with that in another video. In fact, I'll make a carnivore for weight loss video soon in the near future, hopefully in the next week or so. The fifth reason, or the fifth difference between carnivore and keto is why I quit keto for carnivore. Those are cheat foods. You may have noticed that the American Heart Association and similar groups are now endorsing ketogenic diets to address diabetes and other problems. That is at least due in part to the existence now of keto cheat foods in large numbers. It's kind of an open secret. The ketogenic diet is becoming a billion-dollar industry. And if it's a billion-dollar industry, given how many Americans need to shed the extra body weight for just so that they can have a good quality of life, that means it has the potential to be a much more than $1 billion industry. And now the American Heart Association and other groups who famously get a lot of their institutional funding from the organizations they should be critiquing have sort of endorsed it. And that's because I think, at least in part, to the presence of and the potential for keto cheat foods. Those don't exist on the carnivore diet. The closest you get are, again, spice-laden dried meats. Like Epic makes a brand of liver crisps that you will find at Sprouts and maybe at Whole Foods, and they tend to have more spices on them than most carnivores who are like me, who do strict carnivore, would want. But if you're okay with spices and they are a perfectly reasonable food to have, that's the closest I've seen. Those and like Chomp's meat sticks and a few other things. You don't really see, a carnivore dessert. What's a carnivore dessert? You fry a few strips of bacon? I mean, that's really about it. But we see keto protein drinks. We see keto bread. We see keto desserts. I mean, there are keto ice creams that taste pretty good, but when you look at the ingredients, if you're aware of what those things are, you kind of question whether you should eat them or not. That's a huge difference. And that's one of the reasons I quit carnivore or quit keto to go into the carnivore diet. It made my life easier. And for whatever reason, it made discipline about staying with what I need to do easier. I just did Father's Day with my family, and I quote cheated on my meal, my what I do by not tracking macros. I just ate the strict carnivore brisket I made, and I ate the strict carnivore beef ribs, and I had them in an amount that reflected the fact that I was having a good time on a holiday, right? That's about what cheating on a carnivore diet when you stay strict means, versus eating the keto blueberry muffin. And the sixth difference is that keto involves a lot of strict macro counting, and I'm going to contradict myself here because I just talked about tracking macros. While in carnivore, counting and tracking macros are not recommended unless, and this is how I do it, you've tried pretty much everything else to lose body fat, or you're not eating enough, and you need data to keep you on track in keto. Keto almost prioritizes tracking, since you're only supposed to get net 20 grams of carbs per day, give or take. Whereas that's not really necessary on a carnivore diet unless you've tried everything under the sun using carnivore to lose extra body fat, and it's your first priority like it is for me. Then you're going to tend to track. But otherwise, it's actively discouraged. Most of the time when you start carnivore, they tell you, just do it. Just do the beef, butter, bacon, eggs, maybe a little salmon. Do that for 90 days before you do anything else. And that's generally good advice. See if that's all you need to do, right? Just eat that way and you'll be fine. That is not how keto goes. When you're on a ketogenic diet, what's the first advice they give you? Eat 20 total grams of carbs a day. Here are your plant carb sources to do it with. And then here's how much protein and here's how much fat you should have. Here's, get Chronometer or MyFitnessPal. Track. Tracking for carnivore is something you do kind of as a last resort to meet your very specific goals. And while people who have those specific goals should be given some slack for it, it is otherwise actively discouraged. Anyway, those are the main differences between the ketogenic diet and the carnivore diet. If you can think of other differences between keto and carnivore, put them in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help these new channels grow. And if you want more content like this, let me know in the comments, please. And as always, go out and optimize your day today.